Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Gale Weathers problem in the Scream franchise. Gale Weathers is a very interesting entity in the Scream franchise. In hindsight, she really shouldn't even exist past that of Scream 3. Only because her relevancy is no longer needed in the franchise. And what I mean by that is the thing about Scream is, it's about Sidney Prescott, the stuff her mother did, and a bunch of psycho killers always trying to off her every couple of years and everything. She has her supporting cast. Gale is part of that supporting cast. Gale fit the narrative of whatever going on with Sidney for the first three movies perfectly and everything. Gale went from being that of a spiteful, vile, selfish, rude journalist who capitalized on people dying so she could make a profit. And she did that for all first three movies. While she did that, her character started to grow and evolve, but very slowly. She had a soft spot, Dewey. And in turn, it eventually caused her to, her and Sidney was able to reconcile by that of the ending of Scream 2 and then going into Scream 3. She was no longer looked at as like, this selfish, slight villain in like the franchise. She got her happy ending at Scream 3, and her and Dewey were gonna get married and stuff. And originally, this was supposed to be that of a trilogy. But then, of course, the third movie didn't do so well because of like studio interference and real life events with Columbine and everything. And so 10 years later, they made a fourth movie, which is still, in my opinion, very good. However, like I said before, Gale went from this nasty character who was vile, rude, but smart and also strong. Now, in the later part of the franchise, she's just basically a walking meme, or better yet, a walking catchphrase who barely shows up and just seems kind of pointless. And it's even to the point where Courtney Cox is kind of like phoning in her performance and everything. Now, the wrinkle in Gale kind of started in Scream 4. However, Kevin Williamson found a very unique way to put her in the story and everything, which kind of made sense as to who Gale is and what she stands for and what she strives for. But then starting with Scream 5, this is when everything started to unravel with her character. And it started to get like, she started to feel less important. The good thing about Scream 5 is that they fixed her from Scream 4. In Scream 3, she was still this rude, nasty person who tried to capitalize on stuff and was selfish. But she also was a slightly, not necessarily nicer, but more like, trying to solve this mystery was very important. See, the thing about Gale is this. She just started off as a news journalist, reporting the news for another company and everything in the first movie. But before the events of the first movie, she wrote a book on Sidney's mother's death that pissed Sidney off. And as a result, she's also interviewed Cotton Weary several times to, further write her book and everything, to give his side of the story. But she could care less if he rots in jail or gets sent to death row or get off of death row and everything. By Scream 2, she starts to, like, do what she did in the first movie. Only difference now is that she's written another book. She's still a news journalist and everything, but now she's actively trying to help solve the murders to help booster her books, but also to save Dewey because she really has feelings for him, but he's pissed off at her at the moment. By Scream 3, we find out she has her own talk show and everything. It's basically 60 Minutes too. And it's something she's always wanted, the fame and everything. But she gets entangled with the whole Sydney Ghostface thing again because now the studio or the cops need her input on stuff because there's a new Ghostface and he's targeting people based off of, like, the movies that's based off of Sidney Prescott's life that she was involved with. And because of that, the movies are based on her books that she wrote and everything. Her Stab franchise book that made like movies and everything. So she has relevance in that storyline. But then come Scream 4, she decided that she was going to leave her famous lifestyle behind her, no longer write books on the murders and everything. Because, like, I think she said she was about done with that. I think in Scream 3, I can't remember or not. But, like, Dewey proposed and she got married. Her and Sydney are now friends. And that was supposed to be the end of their life. She has now become a wife and she has settled down. No longer having her own talk show and this and that. But the problem with Scream 4 is that she's now back to being extremely rude and extremely sassy. However, I can give that a pass because, like I say, the way Kevin Williamson wrote her. Everything she's always wanted, she got, and she gave it up for love. And then she's moved back to her hometown, which is pretty much just nothing of a town, and she's no longer famous. She's famous by association because of, the murders and everything, but she no longer has her own talk show. This has left her in a rut and has left her saddened and somewhat depressed, and more importantly, it left her irrelevant. To the point that where she's taking it out on Dewey and it's causing a rift in their marriage. Basically, she's old, she's outdated, and she got pushed aside. And we see that constantly in the movie because now we're dealing with the younger cast. She doesn't understand these new rules of like a horror franchise. She's trying to solve things and she's using outdated technology where the new young kids are using newer technology like a headset and with a recorder and stuff like that. And it's even to the point where she now needs input from these young teenagers and even ask them in a very desperate kind of way that, to tag along with them and everything. And she's trying to use like hips, like slang lingo and stuff like that, all while being annoyed that she needs a bunch of teenagers to help her and everything. This is kind of perfect because it kind of brings her character in a different kind of full circle. A full circle of, wow, I was famous one minute and now I'm not. And now I'm having to sponge off the young people to stay relevant and everything. And in a way, that's just her just desserts because she kind of deserves it because she was so nasty in all those other movies. However, by keeping her rude and sassy and everything, which she was throughout that entire movie, it kind of made her into a bit of a walking meme. It's her trying to stay relevant, trying to stay cool, and trying to stay to who she is and everything. But they kind of overdid it with her, but I can give that a pass because of the simple fact of her irrelevancy. She is outdated and she knows that, and she's desperately trying to cling on to some type of resemblance of a cool lifestyle and everything. Then that was kind of like the first cracks in her character, reverting her back to her nasty ways because now she's trying to write a book on her life, but it's just not working. So once the murders start, she's like, woohoo, I get to write about the murders again. The only problem is Sydney. Sydney will not allow the movie studios to make any more stab movies based on her life, and she has threatened to sue. However, there's a bit of a loophole. She didn't say nothing about nobody writing a book about her. And that's the loophole Gale found. But Gale is jealous because Sydney has written books of her own and they're outselling hers, while she has absolutely nothing but her older books and everything. But then comes Scream 5. And Scream 5 is really when you start to see a shift in her personality. Now, by this time, her and Dewey have broken up. They're divorced, and she's now living in New York. But we don't know the type of show she's on. Now, we knew some part of it in Scream 3, the 60 Minutes too, but we never got to see her actually be in that role. Scream 4, she had no show, and she wasn't even a journalist at that time. But now in Scream 5, she's back to what she was. Like, she kind of has her own show. She's in New York, but we never get to see that lifestyle. She's now also barely in the movie. Now, to be fair, in Scream 1, she was barely in it, but when she was in it, she made such an impact. Scream 2 and Scream 3, she's in it a whole lot more. Come Scream 5, she's barely in it and she shows up somewhere in the middle of the movie. Not only that, but she's a completely changed character. She's just mellow and she's nice and she's sincere. She's no longer like rude or vile or anything like that until the killers start showing up at the end. But when they start showing up at the end, she just uses catchphrases and stuff, along with Sydney, and I hate that. They've become kind of like action stars now that either before or after they do something to like the bad person, they say a catchphrase. And this is not an action-packed movie. It's a slasher movie. Now, the thing I have a problem with is that Gale just doesn't feel like Gale. Granted, I am happy she is much nicer because she's a much evolved person. She has reconciled with her past life that's so bad and nasty and everything, and she's a heck of a lot nicer. The problem is she needs a little bit of her edge, just a tiny bit of it to keep her being Gale. But the fact is that since she's barely in the movie, she barely starts to interact with any of the new characters. And not only that, but she's not really investigating the murder. She's just kind of there witnessing stuff and, interacting the way a normal person would. Come Scream 6, it gets way worse now. In Scream 6, they decided, okay, no more nice person. Let's just make her super rude and nasty and vile just the way she was in Scream 1. Not only that, but she's still living in New York. She has a new boyfriend who we don't really see her interact with. But she finally gets her phone call, her much awaited phone call. Her chase sequence, which she's been chased before. But she's just now shooting off one-liners and being rude. Now, she is investigating the murders, yes, but she's just back to being a rude, nasty, Starky person. There needs to be a balance with her and her personality. Kind of like in Scream 2. Scream 2, she was really nasty, but she was nice to certain other characters, like Randy of all people. And then in Scream 3, she was rude to Jennifer, but she was nice to everybody else for the most part. And so there needs to be a balance with her. She just can't be all nice or all rude and nasty. But the problem is now she's barely showing up in the movies, and when she does, it's just a one-liner. Then Scream 7 really took that into a bigger like departure of her character because Guy Busick, who wrote the last three movies, just can't write. In Scream 7, once again, she's showing up in the middle of the movie. As soon as you see her, she's sprouting off a catchphrase and being rude and snarky. She's not really even investigating the murders at this point. Same way in Scream 5. She's just kind of there and being kind of selfish and wanting her interview with Sydney and everything. But she disappears from the third act of the movie. Where the heck did she go, and why is she not trying to save people? Easy. She don't care no more because she's written to be just a footnote in the movie or a background character. And I think Courtney Cox can see that to the point of where Courtney Cox's performance since Scream 4 has really kind of just been lacking. Now in Scream 4, like I said before, I'm giving in the past because she's irrelevant now. And she's trying to cling on to some resemblance of when she was cool and when she was famous. But come that of, say, Scream 6 or so, even Scream 5, Courtney Cox just doesn't seem to care no more when giving a performance. And it's like, I don't get it, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, I think she sees the writing on a wall. Her character has now become, she has now become what her character became in Scream 4, irrelevant. It's a new, younger cast. It focuses on them. Her character, who's an investigative journalist and everything, isn't really investigating no more. And she just kind of shows up to shout off a catchphrase and be a walking meme and everything. And so she's just there to show up, collect the paycheck, and then leave. Because yes, she does have like another show in real life, but it's not taking up the time to where she can't be in this franchise and everything. And that's the problem right there. The problem is that I do want Gale to continue showing up in these movies. She's just a big part like Sydney is. And she's an OG character. But the thing is, I need them to write something relevant for her. That's not just a rehash of what we got before. She needs to be put in the story in a way that is fresh, original, kind of harpers on like the stuff she's did in the past, but moves her character forward and everything. That's not happening no more. Like, yeah, she kind of did help Sydney out, investigate, the mental institution and this and that. But it really went nowhere because the orderly was just lying the entire time. And not only that, but, as good as she is at investigating, she could have figured out some things out a whole lot better than that. And it's to the point that where, thank God, Guy Busick is not there no more, and we have new writers, and hopefully they will do a better job. Hopefully they will bring Gale back to making her relevant again, because she's just pointless now at this point. Like, she really is just pointless and stuff. And I think Courtney Cox sees that to where her performance just isn't great no more. Like, because Courtney Cox can act. She's funny. She was on Friends. She shocked the world with how nasty she could be as Gale Weathers and everything. So she can act, but she's not acting no more. She's just kind of there and kind of just picking up like a paycheck and everything. And that's not good enough for me. And yeah, they could probably bring in a new reporter to act like Gale and everything. But people are going to want Gale Weathers at some point. And even if she's not going to be a journalist, she can still help investigate the murders and everything. And help save people's lives. Or at least interact with the twins a whole lot more, because now they're part of her camera crew and everything. And it's just kind of weird that they're part of her camera crew because she barely interacted with them in the last two movies and everything that led up to like the last movie. So I'm hoping to God with the new writers we got, they will be able to fix like the Gale Weathers problem. Because I really want Gale to be fun again, you know what I'm saying? Relevant again. She doesn't even interact with like the newer cast anymore. Like she barely interacts with them, like in Scream 5 or like Scream 7 and everything. And not to mention, her hairstyle is the same now. In the first three, well, yeah, in the first three Scream movies, she had a completely different hairstyle in each movie. Since Scream 4, she has kept the same exact hairstyle, like her normal long flowing hair. And you know, Gale needs some type of like Gale Weathers type of hairstyle that makes her fierce and everything, not necessarily glamorous and stuff. And they don't even have her do that anymore. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.